Hey, this is just a quick note about our sponsor, Privado, the premier enterprise privacy platform, purpose-built to bridge the gap between privacy and engineering. Its privacy code scanning solution embeds privacy compliance and governance into the product development lifecycle and empowers privacy and security teams with unparalleled visibility of sensitive data flows and the insights to find and fix privacy vulnerabilities. You can leverage Privado's data flows, dynamic data mapping, privacy assessment automation, and real-time visibility of privacy issues. Enter the era of proactive privacy and transform privacy from business blocker to business enabler. To learn more, go to privado.ai.
I think that's where the biggest challenge is for companies is having privacy have that voice and having that voice early instead of, hey, we're about to release this. Does this look okay? If you're in that situation where someone just says, hey, we're about to release this, does this look okay? I mean, it's going to be nearly impossible for privacy to make any kind of dent. You might be able to be like, hey, there's this one thing you should do. But I mean, you can't really hold up a release. But if you're embedded early in the design process, that's where a company really shows its maturity is from a privacy standpoint is how early is privacy being consulted? And then on top of that, is privacy actually being listened to as part of the process?
Hello, I am Debra J. Farber. Welcome to the Shifting Privacy Left podcast, where we talk about embedding privacy by design and default into the engineering function to prevent privacy harms to humans and to prevent dystopia. Each week, we'll bring you unique discussions with global privacy technologists and innovators working at the bleeding edge of privacy research and emerging technologies, standards, business models, and ecosystems. Welcome, everyone, to Shifting Privacy Left. I'm your host and resident privacy guru, Debra J. Farber. Today, I'm delighted to welcome my next guest, Jay Averitt, Senior Privacy Product Manager and Privacy Engineer at Microsoft. Jay transitioned his career from a technology attorney to Privacy Counsel, and most recently to Privacy Engineer. Jay is an active member of the privacy engineering community. He serves as an evangelist in this burgeoning field. I'm delighted to interview him today on this Data Privacy Day episode. This episode's actually going to come out about 2 days after Data Privacy Day, which is January 28th every year. So we're going to chat about his career path, his experiences in privacy engineering roles at companies like Twitter and Microsoft, some of the community projects that he's working on, and of course, ways to spread privacy awareness. Welcome, Jay.
Hi, Deborah. Thanks so much for having me. I've been a big fan of yours and this podcast for a long time, so it's really an honor to be on the podcast. So thanks again for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing your insights. I'm really excited for this discussion about privacy engineering as we see it shaping up in the industry. And, why don't we kick off our discussion with you telling us a little bit about your origin story? I have some follow-up questions I'm really eager to ask you about, but I feel like it's going to set the tone for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up just being really infatuated with technology from an early age. It was funny, just the other day, my wife was looking at a video of all of us talking about what we wanted for Christmas as children. And I was in ninth grade at the time. And she came back to me and she said, what exactly did you ask for Christmas? And I said, that was a 14.4 baud modem. And she just laughed and she's like, God, you were such a dork then. And, that kind of sets the tone of how I was as a child and just really infatuated. Grew up thinking, hey, I'm going to maybe do something with computers, but also was really interested in the law by reading books. The John Grisham books really got me interested in law. And my dad he wasn't a lawyer, but he was a risk manager. So he had a lot of workings with lawyers and I got a lot of contact with lawyers. And so I was also interested in that. And when I got to college, I was trying to decide if I was going to major in something technology related or go the traditional political science route and then go to law school. Luckily, my dad really encouraged me to major in something technology related. And so I majored in management information systems, graduated college with a management information systems degree, it was during the boom in 2000 where lots of people were looking for programmers. So I ended up getting a job at NCR as a C++ programmer. And I started seeing a lot of the programmer jobs being shifted off to India and overseas otherwise during my first couple of years there. And I got a little nervous. I was like, whoa, maybe there won't be software engineers in the future. Well, crystal ball now, I can see that was completely wrong with that. But I was like, maybe this is the time to pivot and go to law school. So I transitioned to practice law from there, or went to law school, and in law school looked for ways to sort of use my law degree with technology and try to think about how I could do that. And started out doing software license agreements, which was great. But at the end of the day, when you're working on a software license agreement, you could be working on a contract to sell a house or sell a car or any of that. So, it wasn't really playing out to my tech skill set. But, in 2010, 2012, I started seeing cloud really come into play into what I was doing from a software licensing experience. And I got really curious about the privacy impact of, in the early 2000s, everything was being installed on computers themselves or in servers, but not being installed out in the cloud somewhere else. And so I started thinking about privacy back then. Got my CFPP certification way back in 2012 when it was all pencil and paper, and just, really planted a seed and looked for ways to, when I was primarily a software license attorney, really looked for ways to do privacy stuff. And every time I had an opportunity to do privacy stuff, I just really loved it. And so that kind of led me down the path of, hey, I'm not really loving this practicing law and looking at contracts all day. What can I do that is privacy related, but not doing that? And there really, until the GDPR hit, there really wasn't an avenue for privacy engineers. I mean, there were people obviously working in privacy from the tech side, but, HIPAA and GLBA, things like that were just not big enough to support a lot of folks working on the technology side of privacy. But when GDPR hit, that sort of changed. And I thought consulting was kind of a way to tow my way into those waters. And so I did some consulting for a couple places, and PwC was the biggest place I spent some time doing consulting. And I really enjoyed that work, getting to see lots of different things. But, I wanted to really focus on the tech. That's just where my love was, and working specifically on privacy tech projects for tech companies. And so when I got an opportunity to do that, I did, and, made the transition to working as a privacy engineer. And I've got to tell you, I've loved that transition, and my days are much happier looking and working on privacy tech projects than looking at contracts all day.
Oh my God, do I hear you on that? Like me, you also, you shifted your career left, right? Addressing privacy earlier on from a focus on law to engineering. I went to law school too. It's not a common story, but, I definitely feel a kinship with you about that, because I know the hard road of becoming a lawyer and what it takes to reframe like your legal and GRC mindset towards privacy and data protection to an engineering mindset, of building an architecture and design and, actually implementing privacy by design into the, tech stacks and systems and, people, processes, and technology, right? What was your journey like from privacy lawyer to privacy engineer in terms of mind shift?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, as you correctly indicated, it is a big shift in the way you are thinking, because so much of being an attorney is really, looking at the risk of something and really just, I'm not saying you're a traffic cop as an attorney, but end out saying no quite a bit and figuring out, obviously good attorneys try to figure out ways around saying no, but you're not focused in on the technology innovation happening. That's really not what you're doing. You're really looking at, okay, what is the risk to the organization? How can I best protect the organization? And you're obviously, you want the business to be successful, but you're not looking and focusing in on the technology around it. So, yeah, I think that was a difficult shift. And I really just wanted to I'm just a dork and ended up like spending 750 hours in a software engineering boot camp so I could get up to speed on Python and JavaScript and what was happening in there. And while I don't really code much, it was just great to see like what architectures were out there from a tech stack and just like get excited about creating stuff again. So I think that's, the real mind shift is, yes, in my role, I spend a lot of time trying to help engineers say, hey, I really think what you're doing is super cool. What can we do from the privacy side to make it a value add? So yeah, I think the whole mindset is a bit different from the legal side, and it was refreshing for me to make that change.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hello, loyal listeners. The Shifting Privacy Left podcast is seeking sponsors who want to help educate our growing community of privacy engineers. Position your brand in front of privacy engineers, architects, developers, researchers, and privacy tech buyers. Insert a 30 to 60 second ad like this one into every published episode of the podcast. This is dynamic content after all. Feature your new product, an upcoming conference, a sponsored special deal, endless opportunities. Email sponsorship@shiftingprivacyleft.com for more information on our sponsorship package. Okay, let's get back to our engaging privacy conversation. Yeah. I think you made that change right at the perfect timing. As you were saying, it was right after GDPR went into effect, and there was like a real need to technically address a lot of data protection requirements. And you just couldn't do that without privacy knowledgeable engineers. For me, one of the challenges that I've had my whole career is that I could see where privacy and data protection was going to go. I could see where it needed to go. And it felt like the world was slow walking its way to shifting left. It was very frustrating for me to kind of like, for me, it was so clear just being in, at this point, privacy for 18 years. But I went and I got my certified Scrum product owner certification because I truly believe that you need to embed privacy into the product development process. And I'm like, this is where it's going to be. And I did this back in almost a decade ago at this point, maybe longer, before they had roles for privacy product managers, right? And I gave up on trying to make that happen when there was no political will in companies to hire for that, right? So I've had to kind of create different career path entry points for what interests me. Just to give you a little perspective of like my challenge, I didn't have the information management system background. I was an English major with a business minor and then went to law school, right? So like I have had to self-learn a lot, but the process of learning is what is, I think, such a big draw for me. What do you think around that? Like I've seen your posts on LinkedIn about constantly learning, and that's a requirement really for privacy engineering. You want to expand upon that a little bit and some of your thoughts about?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a couple of things you just said there actually rang really true, and with me, and particularly the slow walking privacy to where it is, and we're still slow walking at this point. I think. Because in my mind, privacy and security should be, fairly close. Your organization should look at privacy almost the same as it does security because they're equally as important. But at this point, everyone knows security is super important. They know privacy is somewhat important, but I don't think it's really gotten where it doesn't ring true to companies exactly. That's a one-to-one correlation. So I think we still have a ways to go, and I think we will get there, but we're still kind of slow walking. Going back to the learning part of that, yeah, I think to be in this field, you have to want to learn because not only is privacy laws just changing all the time and there may be different regulations coming out. Just for example, like Quebec had a new privacy law came out and I had to look at things that I was doing from an advertising standpoint that I hadn't looked at before. So you might have something like that come out, but also, the tech is just constantly changing. AI really wasn't I mean, AI has always been around, but these LLMs and being incorporated into absolutely everything didn't exist until the last year or so. And then looking at what that means from a privacy standpoint is something that is really new and novel. And folks are scrambling, trying to figure it out. So you have to want to learn, and you have to really enjoy that learning aspect. I mean, for me, that's how I knew that I was making the right shift out of law into more of a tech focused role was for that boot camp I was part of. I was working on a project and I was sitting there looking at code and working on my code. And before I knew it, something like 6 or 7 hours had gone by. And I can tell you, I never looked at a contract and lost track of time. So I think you have to be fascinated with technology and be able to, just appreciate learning new things to really excel in privacy. And, I think that's one of the best things about privacy is that it's sort of a haven for those that really like the lifelong learning aspect.
100% agree. That for me is I never get bored. I have ADHD, I'm neurodiverse. I found an area where I will never get bored. And as you mentioned, that there's brand new technology all the time. Maybe it's XR, maybe it's cloud, maybe it's AI. What's great now that we have privacy engineers that exist, and a lot of them in the big tech firms that have the ability to scale and bring to market technology like rather well, they're going to need to figure out, how do you strategically do this? How do you I feel like privacy engineering is more now about the strategy of architecting it and designing for it. Like before you're ever, even going to the software development lifecycle, there's so many other engineering aspects to think about that you can actually strategize and be part of the well-architected way of deploying these technologies for privacy, data protection, security, trust, safety, all of the tangential things that you care about in addition to privacy and data protection. And so for me, I just love that it's shifting from a compliance and risk, well, there's still risk, but from a compliance standpoint and legal standpoint to more thinking about how could we strategically work with teams to bring this to life and be part of the innovation development process, not the people who always say no and make it harder, but the people who enable you to now unlock the value of your data, maybe in data science, right? And be able to share data or use data and train on data where previously you couldn't because you're deploying privacy enhancing technologies, or you've got a new architecture that has the privacy constraints built into it so that misuse of data can't really happen and things along those lines. So I'm just loving the fact that we could really be part of the value proposition. I mean, again, 18 years in this space, it's taken a long time to finally feel like I've got the role, and I work for myself, but like in the consulting and stuff, the roles that feed my happiness. Yeah. So speaking about feeding your happiness, can you compare for us kind of your experiences working at Twitter versus Microsoft? And obviously I don't mean in like good and bad, like spill the tea. I mean, that would be nice, but that's not what I'm asking for. More of just like compare the ways that the privacy is set up and maybe some of the goals of the company might be different. And, I know Microsoft has a really distributed privacy responsibility based on each team, each product line along those lines.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I think working at Twitter is probably about what you think working at Twitter is from the outside world.
Pre-Musk or post-Musk?
Yeah, I was going to say in the pre-Musk era, I can't really speak to what it's like to work at X, but in the pre-Musk era, Twitter was this app that kind of happened by accident. I mean, the founders of Twitter didn't know exactly what it was going to be, and it turned into this giant app that everyone was using and became extremely popular. And so, with that, I mean, they didn't really know what they were doing from a privacy standpoint or weren't even thinking about it at the time. So they had a lot of stuff happen. The FTC came in, made some consent orders. And so they really put I think, a good team in place to really kind of make their privacy program more mature. I think, they had Leah Kistner in there, who's just amazing in privacy, probably the most prominent privacy engineer or one of the top two or three, if not the most prominent. And, the whole team there at Twitter was really great. And, just a bunch of super smart folks. But the program itself was really sort of, I think the framework was there to really get things done. And I mean, even building a framework is difficult. I mean, I've seen companies, especially startups, that they just don't have a framework. And until you have that framework and program in place and have convinced the org to actually shift privacy left and have engineers and privacy engineers involved in the design process, it's tough to put that program in. Just even knowing where your data is and all that is tough. So Twitter had all of that foundation in place. And it was really kind of trying to get buy-in from engineers to follow the framework that was in place. None of the processes were formalized to the degree that they are like at Microsoft, for example, but they, had the right framework in place. And, as far as the culture at Twitter, I mean, like I said, it's about what you expected. A bunch of it felt like a very young organization, even then. Twitter had been around for a while, but it still kind of had that startup feel to it. And then, transition to Microsoft, I guess until I got there, I really hadn't seen what a mature privacy org had looked like and how somebody who had really, and, I think there's probably a couple other companies out there that have super mature privacy orgs. I know Google has a pretty mature privacy org and some others do as well, but I hadn't been on the inside to see anything like Microsoft before. There already was this buy-in from engineers, buy-in from pretty much the org in general that, hey, look, we're really going to shift privacy left. We're going to consider privacy early on in the process. And I've got a team of folks that really get privacy. And I'd say, privacy is extremely important. I mean, I can't say that every time that there's a privacy problem that it is 1,000% resolved to my satisfaction. But I will say that if I say something from a privacy standpoint, it'll definitely get looked at and it'll be considered and it's really valued, which I think that's where the biggest challenge is for companies is having privacy have that voice and having that voice early instead of, hey, we're about to release this. Does this look okay? If you're in that situation where someone just says, hey, we're about to release this, does this look okay? I mean, it's going to be nearly impossible for privacy to make any kind of dent. You might be able to be like, hey, there's this one thing you should do. But I mean, you can't really hold up a release. But if you're embedded early in the design process where there's 1,000 things. For example, like Microsoft will have, a private preview or a public preview before it ever gets to some kind of release. And they're meeting with me before they even are testing this out on Microsoft employees. So I think that's where a company really shows maturity is from a privacy standpoint is how early is privacy being consulted? And then on top of that, is privacy actually being listened to as part of the process?
That's pretty awesome for a large company. I have not had a positive experience in a large company like that, where they have truly understood their mandate for privacy and data protection and staffed the organization accordingly. I am envious of your experience there. I wish that upon everyone, though. I think that is how it really should be, right? I mean, we need to get to that point. I do wonder, though, even where I have seen privacy kind of responsibilities, no matter whether it's an engineering or risk or whatnot, in a large engineering focused organization, like for instance, I'm pulling from my Amazon experience. One of the challenges I had was that I might have an understanding of my product offering or unit that I'm in, or, for me, that was AWS or Prime Video. But there was just too much going on across the organization, and it was just too distributed a responsibility that I really had no idea what was going on outside of our, individual business unit. And, I wonder to what extent, do you have, suggestions even in the, spirit of Privacy Awareness Day, of how organizations can better, especially engineering focused ones, can better message, here's how we can unify as an organization, not You know what I mean? So you have more of a unified kind of perspective.
I think you bring up a good point. I mean, I think, there's 220,000 employees at Microsoft. So me getting to know all of them is impossible.
There's over 1 million at Amazon. Over 1 million. I worked at IBM and I said, I'll never work for a company this large again. And somehow I ended up at a 1 million person company.
Right. So it's impossible. You can't know everybody, and you can't even know. I feel like I know a decent amount of folks in privacy, but I don't know everybody. But I do think that there's a pretty good unity between, for example, I'm on the Office 365 side. So we're looking at things like Exchange and OneDrive and SharePoint and stuff like that. And there's other teams that are working on things like Word and Excel and all of that. And, I know who those folks are. And there's a lot of overlap between that. And, a lot of times, like, for example, if I see something that I'm working on that's impacting their space, I certainly reach out to them and say, hey, I think this might look okay from a privacy standpoint, but what do you think? And then vice versa, and then there's like things that the other day, somebody ironically enough was asking me about there's apparently a OneDrive podcast, and I support OneDrive, and they wanted to do a giveaway if people left reviews and stuff like that. And they're like, hey, can you look at this from a privacy standpoint? And, I was like, well, this is just different because usually I'm looking at things, consulting with engineers about their designs and stuff. And I was like, I can certainly give you my thoughts on this from a privacy standpoint, but we probably need to involve some people from like our marketing privacy team to look at this, because I may not know all the ins and outs of giveaways, and there's probably some legal ramifications of that. So maybe we should look at that. I think it's impossible to know an entire, if you're at a giant company like these big tech companies, you can't know everybody, but you can, privacy is not going to be giant even at these big tech companies. So you can at least get to know a few folks across each division. And then when stuff pops up, you can say, oh, who's there? And like, I guess I'm also got the good fortune of having a really senior team. And so if I have something that pops up like, hey, who's in marketing privacy, they can they know. So that's lucky. But if you don't have that team, I think, making those introductions across outside of your matrix into other teams is important, because I think, unity and privacy is great, and building those relationships is great. And I mean, even like, I guess just from my post on LinkedIn, I had somebody from LinkedIn's privacy team reach out to me over our team, since Microsoft owns LinkedIn, and he introduced myself. And so I don't have a lot of interaction with LinkedIn privacy, but I was like, oh, that's cool that I'm getting to talk with somebody from LinkedIn privacy. So I think the more interaction you can make is great. And I'm really big on just having a community of privacy, because ultimately, like, we're talking about the whole learning aspect of this, like, nobody knows everything. And there's plenty of blind spots I've got, and I need a bunch of people to bounce things off of. And so I think, we all do. I think the more you can do to reach out across outside of your specific team to build those relationships is great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that. We talked about it a little bit earlier about how privacy engineers can leverage their experience and role to enable privacy design, research, architecture, development, and data science without being seen as a blocker to business. We talked about that it is a challenge, but how can privacy engineers actually be an enabler rather than a blocker? What are some tips that you've kind of picked up in the trade?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about relationships. I mean, I think that when I'm talking with engineers, especially like new engineers that are going through a privacy review, a lot of them are almost nervous just because they don't know what to expect. They don't know what they're looking at. And I try to build a relationship with engineers, and that, hey, look, we're on the same team. I love innovation, and let me see what this cool thing is you're doing, and let's just look at maybe how we can make sure that privacy is being considered. And a lot of times, I mean, I may look at it and be like, hey, you did it just exactly the way I would have done it. And, there's no need for me to really inject any further privacy into it. But I mean, if there is a need for, it's usually like, hey, did you consider this? And a lot of times it wasn't intentionally that they made it not focused on privacy, is maybe they just didn't think about it from that perspective. So I think the first tip I would say is really build those relationships with the engineers, and try to show them that we're all on the same side and how privacy can be a value add to the organization. I mean, I think that's really the second tip is, I mean, nobody likes a traffic cop. And so just being a blocker and saying no is not going to make you win any friends or make you valuable to your organization. How you can be valuable to your organization is say, hey, look, this is a way we can make privacy more friendly, make our users love our product more. And ultimately, if the user loves our product more and trusts our product more because it has the best privacy features, that makes it more innovative and it creates our overall goal of, increasing the bottom line. So I think that's the thing I would suggest.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Appreciate it. Let's turn now to some of the work you do. Like, what is a technical privacy review? I know you're always such a good sharer of information to educate others. You're an evangelist of privacy engineering like myself. So I really appreciate that you're constantly posting your thoughts. And I did see that you posted recently about like people asking me what a technical privacy review is and then answered it. So I figure this is a good spot to ask that for you again.
Yeah, sure.
You have an answer already,
Yeah, I think technical privacy review is something that I didn't know a whole lot about until I actually started doing it. So it's interesting. I mean, a lot of it is being concerned about the data flow. Specifically, the engineers will bring something to me, and the first questions I'm asking really are around, hey, what new data are we collecting as part of this feature? And then once we find out what that new data is, figuring out what the data classification of that data is. So, is this basically, each organization has different levels of sensitivity of that data, but based on how sensitive that data is, and specifically if it falls into the categories of where the GDPR would require you to honor a DSAR. A DSAR is where a data subject or an individual makes a request to have their information being deleted. We want to make sure that we're only retaining that data for a certain period of time because we want to be able to honor those requests and things like that. So it's really looking at, one, the data being collected, how sensitive is the data being collected, and then how is the data flow? So looking at data flow diagrams to see how the data flows from the front end application to the back end. And so really looking and seeing, okay, how long is it staying in that database for how long? And, just looking and making sure that everything is coinciding with our data retention schedules and all of that. So that's a large part of it. And then after we perform that review, making recommendations of, hey, maybe we shouldn't be, you are retaining it for this period of time. Why do you need to retain it for that period of time? And then asking them, after you ask that question, I'd say, okay, well, you do need to retain it for that length of time. Maybe, is there some way we can de-identify the data? So really looking at all of that. And then it's not just me, there's also, we have compliance folks and attorneys on the phone that will really analyze things from a GDPR standpoint. And so with that, I kind of feel my role as more of an interpreter to the attorneys to say, because a lot of looking at these data flow diagrams can get really complicated, specifically like when you're looking at all these repository names and all the different types of data. So really being able to distill to the attorneys, hey, look, we're collecting this level of data, the sensitive type, and we're retaining for this long. Is this going to make sense from a GDPR standpoint, or do you think there's some safeguards we should put in place? Or, specifically if we're looking at GDPR, looking at the data flow to Europe, how stuff is being processed in Europe or whether or not it's being processed in America, and figuring out if we can, and compliance also would look at that to see what we have in our contracts with our customers to see, hey, can we process this in this geographical area and things like that. So it's really, I would say, to sum it all up, is really looking at, one, the data being collected, what type of data being collected, And then that flow of data, it's really the crux of a technical privacy review.
Awesome. Thank you. That's definitely some insight into technical privacy reviews. And, there's not like any one way to do it either, right? There's going to be different workflows, processes, and whatnot for each company. But like, I think that's a great high level overview of kind of like the typical process there. That makes sense. So, like I said, Data Privacy Day, when this is published, will have just happened 2 days prior. What are some of the Data Privacy Day activities that you're participating in this year, especially around privacy engineering, but whatever you're involved in?
So I'm actually speaking at a Privacy Everywhere conference at the University of Illinois to talk with Simon Fancy on LLMs and the privacy world and figuring out and talking about AI governance around those, doing a chat around that. And then I think the day before on the 25th, I'm actually giving a fireside chat for Privacy Fest, which I think you're involved with as well.
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little more? I kind of threw this softball because I wanted you to talk it up.
Yeah, I think the work that's being done by Mercan is really interesting. Security.
Just in case anyone didn't hear, he's talking about Privacy Quest. And if you don't mind kind of giving a little sense of what is that? What are we before the analysis?
Yeah. So Mercan is kind of gamified privacy and has different games and simulations to show privacy from, instead of it just being, hey, look, here's a quiz on privacy, or here, let me tell you about privacy. It actually makes it more of a game. And, security does this. Everyone's done these like
capture the flag kind of competitions.
Right, exactly. But privacy doesn't. And so maybe some places do, but historically hasn't done it very well. So the work I think he's doing is really interesting. And he's organized a festival around that where he's got different AI teams working, one on one side and one on the other. And then he's got a number of fireside chats. I think you're hosting a game night.
I'm doing a quiz night. I'm doing 3 different quiz nights, but yeah, it'll be, so he's got all these events to gamify the learning experience for privacy engineering. I mean, he's got a whole platform. That's what Privacy Quest does, but he's, using Data Privacy Day to create its separate set of events over 1 month. So it's not just Data Privacy Day. When you're listening to this at the end of January, this goes on, I think, into mid to late February as well. And there's all sorts of events with the 2 different factions, like the AI doomers versus the AI optimists. And you have to pick one and you'll be part of a team because everybody who's joining in, will be completing tasks and such towards experience points for the team. And so then you get to play around with a storyline too that walks you through the setting, and he's using AI generated images to go along with the narratives and the games, and he's pulling it all together with different puzzles and learning modules around privacy engineering that is super fun. So if anyone who's listening, tune in for Jay's fireside chat. And definitely, just check out the platform too, because it's perfect for privacy awareness any day of the year. But then, of course, this event is kind of fun too.
And I'm super interested in your quiz night and see how that goes. Yeah, I think what he's doing is super interesting. And I think that is needed because really, we've not done a great job in privacy of making it fun. And I mean, that's actually one of my goals, is making privacy training that's actually fun to take, because I think security does that, but I don't think privacy does that very well.
Yeah. This is also something you'll see if you ever go to DEF CON. For those who are listening, I go every year. My other half is a hacker. This is a thing, we do. I've been for at least 6 times. Somewhere between 6 and 8 times. I'm not sure, but I think around 6. Anyway, these are the types of, they call them CTFs, capture the flag kind of games that it gamifies, because you get red team versus blue team. You get you could take different personas, so you can actually, today I'm going to be a blue teamer and see what it's like to play this game thinking in terms of defending my systems, right? Versus I'm on the red team, I'm trying to find the vulnerabilities in it and shifting the mindset and how you would think in terms of attacking. That's traditionally in security. And so for the privacy, it's not going to be so clear of defend and attack, but you're starting to see that in AI attacks for privacy. There's more, you could start seeing how if you threat model for privacy and what the potential privacy harms are, you could simulate very similar to how security has done it. And this is a little like maybe it's a premature little secret announcement, but we may be at DEF CON next year. Like this is our plan. I'm a formal advisor for Privacy Quest. Sorry, I should probably have stated that up front, but we're trying to kind of move in there. So many engineers go there. There's an opportunity to capture the interest of the security engineers who have an overlapping interest in privacy and data protection within their organizations. And then there's, last year, Yuta Williams had a really successful AI Village event where she also did a CTF, but for people to attempt to get LLMs, all the different LLMs that exist, the base models, to output something it shouldn't, right? And then documenting and making that, gamifying that experience, and then being able to then have a comprehensive library of potential challenges that can then be addressed, right? For threat modeling specifically. And that was a success. And so, I'm starting to see more privacy, AI overlapped, tangential to security kind of CTFs happening at DEF CON. So hopefully we can make that happen this year. It's our goal.
No, that sounds super exciting. I hope you guys do make it to DEF CON. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of, it's the logistical aims. Everything at DEF CON is like community organized. So if someone has an idea for what they call a village, a car hacking village or a plane hacking village, and these are real villages that happen at DEF CON. They bring in a plane, they bring in a car, voting machine hacking village, right? And that's hardware and software, but they have so many different villages. And so it's just a matter of like, getting the space, getting on the agenda, making sure you have if you need internet connectivity, then like a dedicated safe line, because you're certainly not going to use the most like attacked network in the world, which is the DEF CON network, like Wi-Fi network during that week. All right. I'm talking way too much about this, but I'm really excited. Okay. I was also delighted to see that we both are sitting on the programming committee for the Pepper'24 conference, the Privacy Engineering Practice and Respect Usenix conference. Are you excited for the conference this June? And how has attending Pepper been of value for you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, I'm super excited. Pepper'23, I've never been at a conference that I actually got so much value out of. I mean, usually conferences where you kind of just like, I never find real value in the programs being presented. I mean, there may be one or two out of 50 that you find interesting. And then like the networking aspect of it is so difficult because there's so many different people doing so. I mean, like for example, not to throw IAPP under the bus because I'm speaking at the Global Forum too, but it's just a different atmosphere when you've got so many lawyers and so many people in privacy doing so many different things. It's hard to find people doing exactly what you do. While privacy engineering is a big umbrella, you're surrounded by like 200 people that really get what you do. It's great for networking, and the programs, I mean, they were so good. I mean, even some that were above my head because I don't understand. I understand differential privacy and what you're trying to accomplish, but I can't do it. It's fascinating. So yeah, it was, like I said, the best conference I ever attended. Super excited about going this year. And I mean, I plan on going every year that it's available. And I hope everyone does, honestly, because I think, like I said, that sense of community we have and privacy, I think it's great. And it really getting just to chat with all these folks who I'd interacted with on LinkedIn or in other places was just great. And it was easy to do instead of having to seek people out at a giant conference.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. It was, I came back just feeling on a high. It's a 2-day conference. And you might remember me up in front, sitting next to Jason Kronk, writing constantly. Like I'm old school. I still write notes. I can't, like, typing isn't the same like thing for me. My brain learns kind of like as I'm writing too. I'm thinking here's all of these amazing topics and interesting like presentations that potential speakers for this podcast, just a wealth of information. I was just really astounded by, again, the networking opportunity, but like everyone was excited to be there. No one was there being, oh, my company sent me, I have to be here. This was something people like fought to get either budget to go. Not that it's an expensive conference. It's actually pretty reasonable. It's a nonprofit and everything, and it's not vendor heavy or anything. It's pretty much sponsored by companies that want to hire privacy engineers. So it's like they have their, recruiters there, if anything. But It really was like I met some of my heroes. I think I even met you there for the first time in person.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did meet there for the first time.
Yeah. It was absolutely wonderful. And I think that I urge people who are interested in privacy engineering, or if this is your main focus, this is a conference not to miss. It was just such an exchange of ideas. I mean, everyone in privacy engineering too is coming from different perspectives, right? Like somebody who's like deep into differential privacy is not usually deep into another PET, right? And so like each PETs, like people who are deploying them, like there's, the libraries, they know the, open source libraries, they know the different deployment mechanisms. They're deep in maybe the data science, but they're not necessarily crossing over into being deep into all of the privacy enhancing technologies. So as those people were talking about those deployments, and we heard from governments like government of Singapore on how they did some implementations of interesting things. I'm trying to remember what it was, but it was just a cross-section of industry and academia and evangelists, and just a happy place. And I know that this conference is going to have thousands of people in the future. I believe that. I mean, I totally see that. So if you really want to get in on it now, where it's small enough to feel super manageable as a conference, easily be able to talk to anyone there. Everyone's just excited to meet others who are interested in this space and share ideas. I'm still working on a project that I found by attending Pepper and meeting a company that's got a consulting firm, and I'm a subcontractor to them now, working on a California DMV mobile driver's license and verified credentials project. I can't tell you how many dividends my attending Pepper was. And so thank you for sharing yours. I feel like I'm going on and on about my experience, but I wanted to since we're both programming committee members, I just want to underscore that we jumped on being on this program committee because of how wonderful an experience it is. It's my delight to volunteer.
Oh, absolutely. 100% echo everything you just said. I can't speak highly enough about the conference.
Awesome. So we're getting towards closing. I know we could go on all day just talking about our love of the space, but I'd love to hear, as people try to keep up with what's new in the discipline of privacy engineering, what resources you refer people to, what communities you might plug into. How do you stay up to date?
Yeah, for starters, listen to this podcast. But no, I think podcasts are actually a good source of information, not just this podcast, but other privacy podcasts out there. Just because other folks, I learned something from listening to them, from everybody that's doing, because everybody, like I said, privacy engineering is such a big umbrella. Everybody's doing something a little different. So I love hearing other people talk about what they're doing, and I learned from that. But I think there's also, I think LinkedIn, actually, looking at your feed, I think connecting with a bunch of folks that are in privacy and looking at, what's popping up is great. I learn a lot from just seeing stuff pop across my feed. And I think that's a good source of information. As far as building community, I think LinkedIn is another way of doing that. I think there's various Slacks out there that have tried to create a privacy community, but there's not one that I can fully recommend at the moment. But I think LinkedIn and listening to podcasts really are the primary ways I do it.
Interesting. Those are the primary ways I do it too. And I was curious if there were any Slack groups that you're oh, this community is just totally hot right now, but I haven't really found one myself. I do know that there's communities like openmind.org, right? Where, if you are actually working with data science tools and super technical and want to understand, deploying PETs to unlock the value in data science of your data sets, you could go really deep. There's 16,000 plus community members in their Slack group that are actively working on, deploying these things, taking their free courses, and then asking for help from mentors there that volunteer to help. But it's not one that I participate in because, again, it's just it's too technical for my purposes. Yeah, those are the ones I follow too. I used to follow a lot more on, Twitter. I'm just not on X anymore as much. I occasionally go there to see what crazy is going on the platform, but I don't really use it. I think there's an opportunity, out there for communities to be stood up. I think there's a thirst from privacy engineers to be able to ask questions of other people. And so maybe I'll try something with Shifting Privacy Left brand, but I would need some partners. So reach out if anybody, wanted to work with me and maybe Jay and maybe some other evangelists out there to maybe bring that to life. Just before we close, what words of wisdom do you have for getting into privacy engineering?
Yeah, I think it's, if you've got that passion and that love of learning, and I think there's, some resources out there. I think the privacy classes that are on it, like Bravado and stuff, are good places to start. And I think there's some books out there that are good, like the Privacy Run book, Privacy Engineering Run book, and things like that are good to give you an overview. But, I also think, if you're really wanting to build up your tech skills, coding is one way to do it. But I think really more important than that is really understanding data flows and being able to understand and articulate, distinguish between different data types, and then being able to understand how the data is flowing from the front end to the back end. I think those are critical skills. So yeah, I think that's great. And I think that also looking at LinkedIn and looking and seeing what people are posting that are active in the field is a good way of seeing different ways you can kind of break in.
Awesome. Well, Jay, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and insights. And thanks for everyone else for joining us today. Until next Tuesday, when we'll be back with engaging content and another great guest or guests. Thanks for joining us this week on Shifting Privacy Left. Make sure to visit our website, shiftingprivacyleft.com, where you can subscribe to updates so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found this episode valuable, go ahead and share it with a friend. And if you're an engineer who cares passionately about privacy, check out Privado, the developer-friendly privacy platform and sponsor of this show. To learn more, go to privado.ai. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday for a new episode. Bye for now.